We were one of the first entrants into the market back in 2013, really at the inception of private credit in Europe. We took a view back then that most of the activity was taking place in the unitranche sponsored market, and to be different, we actually took an approach to focus primarily on non-sponsor backed lending. So we've developed now a strategy that's going past a decade, which is focused on primarily asset-backed, non-sponsor-backed lending in areas where banks are withdrawing. So things like financing or situations which potentially have a little bit of complexity that means that traditional banks are unable or not willing to participate. Well, with non-sponsor lending, one of the keys is to have local presence. To be honest, our experience has been that the gestation period of some of these transactions is no less than what you would expect in a private equity deal. You have to build trust with the borrower. It's really based on relationship lending, and therefore that local presence and understanding the differences between markets is absolutely key to getting the deal done. So in more recent times, as we've moved some of our focus towards the corporate market with some of the decline in leverage multiples and leverage expectations, we've sought to create a partnership with a bank to focus primarily on sponsored backed lending. That was really our view in terms of how to enter the market with a differentiated entry point through bank lending. And that partnership is a way of playing in both own source unitranche as well as what traditionally has been a senior club market. It gives us the benefit of having a pipeline that can draw on both elements in the market. And those are the two elements that generally people feel are consistently battling for market share. So what the banks are doing and what private credit is doing. Here, by having a bank partnership, in many ways we are insulated from those dynamics and frankly somewhat agnostic as to where the balance of power lies at any moment in time. So it's been, with the capital raise, it's obviously been a very competitive part of the market for a few years now. There have been very few barriers to entry. And I think the way the market will evolve is that you'll see some of the better players really start to stand out. Those who have been more cautious with risk and those that have underwritten the best deals will continue to be successful in the market. I have seen volumes come back, and I think that's becoming more apparent now as we come towards the end of Q3, and hopefully that momentum will continue into Q4. There's certainly feeling that the convergence of price expectations between buyer and seller is certainly happening now, and therefore that should stimulate, with all the private equity dry powder on the sidelines, that should stimulate some more activity going into 2025. Sure, so very often we're asked the question about what are the key pitfalls in investing in Europe, and the reality is every jurisdiction differs. And every jurisdiction differs not just from a regulation perspective, but in terms of whether or not you need a banking license. There are some quirks within certain countries, like, for example, equitable subordination in Germany, anti-usury laws in Italy. And of course, we don't have Chapter 11 the way the US does. So that means you have to be very careful in underwriting, particularly if you're not senior, and trying to make sure that you have a path to controlling your own destiny. Now, what's interesting about the enforcement process and recovery is in many ways for first lien, it's been over-dramatized. So what do I mean by that? If you look at the average recovery for senior first lien in Europe, it's been about 72% on average in restructurings. France, believe it or not, is actually the highest recovery. So France is about 75%, despite the fact that many people attribute some borrower-friendly regimes like conciliation to France. It has been the highest recovery. So where's the issue? Well, the issue lies in two situations. Number one is international investors often underestimate the complexity of the process of restructuring in Europe because of the number of constituents involved, like trade unions, etc., that very often are not involved in the US. And secondly, and here's where it becomes really important, is the recovery on junior debt. And on junior debt, our experience post the global financial crisis is junior debt typically has recovered close to 0% of the principal and has recovered maybe even only 5% of the post-restructuring equity, which is very little, obviously. Well, the French market is one which has the advantage of being somewhat secluded in the sense that the barriers of entry are quite high. It's very much a relationship-driven market, and therefore those funds that have local presence and reputation do very well. Obviously, you can look at the top three and you realize that very quickly the two of the top three private credit funds are French, whereas in the UK, the top three credit funds are US managers, and that gives you a sense of the barriers to entry. We've seen a lot of volume, a lot of unitranche volume over the last 9 months, and in particular that's been driven by the emergence of the large cap market, or what I would call the upper middle market here in France. And so for the first time, France actually exceeded the UK in terms of the number of deals done and become the largest direct lending market in Europe. And so I see this as a really exciting opportunity, especially for participants that have the ability to access some of the deal flow.